Good afternoon, Beard and families. Nice to see you again. Welcome to Teaching 9/11 Part 2. So, when I was speaking to my partner in crime, Mr. Weininger, he thought it might actually be a good idea if we did 3 parts. So moving forward, once we get out of the COVID, maybe we would have one for each grade level and it would make a logical progression. If we do have a part 3, assuming we get done with today's on time, then part 3 would focus on the 9/11 memorial and everything involving that. So I guess a logical progression would be what you saw the first time should probably be in the middle, kind of like a 7th grade presentation. What you're going to see today would probably be the 6th grade presentation, and what part 3 would be the 8th grade presentation, just logically in terms of chronology. That said, there was only supposed to be 1 slide presentation today, which is my photos from the day of the event and after. However, the one thing I tended to forget about given all of this is that when I give a presentation, I can ad-lib and fill in information and answer questions. And I'm also taking for granted, like when I gave the part 1 presentation, that everybody knows at least the basics of 9/11. And that may be a very faulty assumption, because people out in the audience, particularly the young people who saw part 1 of my presentation, might not really have the frame of reference for the events that unfolded that day. So I decided to create a whole new presentation focusing on the factual events of what happened that day. Hopefully that'll take half of this, and then I'll follow that slideshow with the photographs of the day, and I think that'll make sense and that makes a logical progression. I don't know how good the slides are going to come out. I don't think they came out that great last time from what I heard. I didn't watch the presentation myself for a variety of reasons. And Mrs. Brown, who was assisting our virtual storytellers with this, asked for an actual copy of the slides. And since I'm old and I got to bed early, I wasn't able to get them to her prior to the publication of the first video. She does have copies of these slides, however, so hopefully that'll make it better for everybody to see. But the reason why I'm saying this is because as I go through this first set of slides, second set of slides is strictly pictures, which I will narrate, but the first set of slides has text, which is quite small, and you might not be able to read it, so I am actually going to read the slides, which I don't normally do. I don't like reading slides verbatim, but in this particular case, I'm going to do that. Just for the sake of efficiency, and so hopefully everybody can get the full effect of the slide and what's going on in terms of factual information. So here is our opening up with our Teaching 9/11 logo. This was actually designed, I don't think I mentioned this, by Mr. Weininger's daughter when she was, I want to say maybe a freshman in high school. She's actually has since graduated college and actually does graphic design for a living now, so we like to think we were her first project. But this is the logo we use for our teaching company or teaching organization, and that's what we see up on the first slide. This is an actual picture of the World Trade Center 19 years ago from September 11. So this was actually taken the morning of September 11, 2001, before the attacks. And the flag you see in the foreground, I believe, is Liberty Island, where the Statue of Liberty is. Okay, first event, 7:59 a.m. American Airlines Flight 11 takes off from Boston. 11 crew members, 76 passengers, and 5 hijackers are on board. The aircraft is filled with 76,400 pounds of fuel for its transcontinental run to Los Angeles. Kind of keep that figure in mind. That's going to be very important as I talk about the second set of slides. Second event, 8:14 a.m. United Airlines Flight 175 takes off from Boston for Los Angeles. 9 crew members, 51 passengers, and 5 hijackers on board. The flight is loaded with 76,000 pounds of fuel. Third event, 8:19 a.m. Flight attendant Betty Ong alerts American Airlines ground personnel to a hijacking underway on Flight 11, reporting that the cockpit is unreachable. Using an in-flight phone, Ong transmits detailed information about the hijacking on the call, which lasts about 25 minutes. Shortly before Ong's call, a hijacker, likely Satam al-Suqami, has stabbed the passenger seated directly in front of him in first class. Hijackers Mohammed Atta and Abdul Aziz Al-Umari are seated in close proximity as well. The passenger, identified as Daniel M. Lewin by the flight crew, has served 4 years in the Israeli army. The final report on the National Commission on Terrorist Attacks upon the United States speculates he may have tried to stop the hijackers. Lewin was likely the first person killed in the 9/11 attacks. At 8:21 a.m., 2 minutes into Ong's call, the hijackers turn off the plane's transponder, a device that allows air traffic control to identify and monitor an airplane's flight path. Meanwhile, American Airlines authorities relay details from Ong to their operations center in Texas. 5 minutes later, Ong provides the hijackers' seat numbers. After several failed connections at 8:32 a.m., flight attendant Madeline Amy Sweeney reports the hijacking of Flight 11 to a friend on the ground, a manager at Boston Logan International Airport. Over the course of approximately 12 minutes, Sweeney provides key information about the hijacking, including a description of the perpetrators. And audio recordings of all of this are available in the public forum if you search for them. Fourth event, 8:20 a.m. American Airlines Flight 77, en route to Los Angeles, takes off from Washington Dulles International Airport. 6 crew members, 53 passengers, and 5 hijackers are on board. The flight is loaded with 49,900 pounds of fuel. Fifth event, 8:24 a.m. Attempting to communicate with passengers and crew inside Flight 11's cabin, hijacker Mohammed Atta presses the wrong button and instead broadcasts to air traffic control, unwittingly alerting controllers to the attacks. Minutes later, Atta again makes an unintended transmission to ground control. At least one of Atta's transmissions is picked up by the pilot of Flight 175, Victor V. Saraceni, who will inform the Federal Aviation Administration of what he has heard minutes before his own plane is hijacked. Sixth event, 8:30 a.m. Warning activities have commenced at the World Trade Center, a commercial building complex in Lower Manhattan owned by the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, an interstate agency. In addition to the signature Twin Towers, 1 and 2 World Trade Center, the complex includes a hotel, 3 World Trade Center, 4 office buildings, 4, 5, 6, and 7 World Trade Center, a shopping mall, restaurants, a public plaza, and a major transportation hub. Around 8:30 a.m., roughly 80 people have gathered to attend the Risk Waters Group Financial Technology Conference on the 106th floor of the North Tower. 72 restaurant staff have arrived in advance of the morning's breakfast service and conference preparation. Other special events at the World Trade Center planned for September 11th include the National Association for Business Economics Conference, already underway in the Marriott Hotel, an evening dance performance on the World Trade Center Outdoor Plaza, and a Peace Corps information session scheduled for 6 p.m. in 6 World Trade Center. And again, as I'm reading these, a lot of these facts are very important as we get to part 2 and I show you some pictures and expand on some of what you're hearing here with some additional visuals. 8:37 a.m., 7th event. After hearing hijacker Mohammed Atta's transmissions, Boston Air Control Center alerts the U.S. Air Force's Northeast Defense Sector, headquartered in Rome, New York. In response, NEADS mobilizes Air National Guard jets out of Otis Air Force Base in Falmouth, Massachusetts, to identify and follow the hijacked Flight 11. 8th event, 8:41 a.m. Scheduled to leave Newark International Airport within minutes of the other hijacked flights, United Airlines Flight 93 takes off after a delay due to routine traffic. 7 crew members, 33 passengers, and 4 hijackers are on board the San Francisco-bound flight, which is filled with 48,700 pounds of fuel. 9th event, 8:46 a.m. 5 hijackers crash American Airlines Flight 11 into floors 93 to 99 of the World Trade Center North Tower. The 76 passengers and 11 crew members on board and hundreds inside the building are all killed instantly. The crash severs all 3 emergency stairwells and traps hundreds of people above the 91st floor. 8:50 a.m., 10th event. While visiting an elementary school in Sarasota, Florida, U.S. President George W. Bush is informed that a small plane has hit the North Tower. Bush and his advisors assume the crash is a tragic accident. 11th event, 8:55 a.m. Your attention, please, ladies and gentlemen. Building 2 is secure. There is no need to evacuate Building 2. If you are in the midst of evacuation, you may use the re-entry doors and the elevators to return to your office. Repeat, Building 2 is secure. This announcement was made by the Port Authority Fire Safety Employee System using the South Tower's public address system at approximately 8:55 a.m. 12th event, 9:03 a.m. 5 hijackers crashed United Airlines Flight 175 into floors 77 through 85 of 2 World Trade Center, the South Tower, killing the 51 passengers and 9 crew members on board the aircraft and an unknown number of people inside the building. The impact renders 2 of the 3 emergency stairwells impassable and severs a majority of the elevator cables in this area, trapping many above the impact zone inside elevator cars. Shortly after the hijacked Flight 171 strikes the South Tower, some workers in the building jump or fall to their deaths, a phenomenon already witnessed after the attack on the North Tower. Estimates of the number of people who died as a result of falling from the Twin Towers range from 50 to more than 200. A 13th event, 9:31 a.m. Speaking from Florida, President Bush calls the events in New York City an apparent terrorist attack on our country. Okay, this should be the 14th event. I think they're out of order. I had to insert some slides, so I actually may have to make some corrections here. 5 hijackers crash American Airlines Flight 7, this is 9:37 a.m., crash American Flight 77 into the Pentagon. The 53 passengers and 6 crew members on board perished. The crash and ensuing fire killed 125 military and civilian personnel on the ground. Okay, this is the 15th event. They were inverted. This is actually a copy of the teletype message that the Federal Aviation Administration sent out grounding all flights in the United States, the first time in history before or since. 16th event, 9:58 a.m. 37 telephone calls are known to have been made from hijacked Flight 93, most placed from the rear of the plane. One of the last calls is made by a passenger, Edward P. Felt, who uses his cell phone to dial 911 after closing himself in a restroom to avoid detection. By 9:58 a.m., Flight 93 is flying so low that he succeeds in reaching an emergency operator in nearby Westmoreland County, Pennsylvania. And that is because, I'll just comment on this, cell phones don't work in the air because cell phones work off cell phone towers, which are on the ground. That's why air phones, which are different, are actually satellite phones, which work off satellites. 17th event, 9:59 a.m. After burning for 56 minutes, the South Tower collapses in 10 seconds. More than 800 civilians and first responders inside the building and in the surrounding area as killed as a result of this attack. 18th event, 10:07 a.m. 4 hijackers crashed Flight 93 into a field near the town of Shanksville, Somerset County, Pennsylvania, after passengers and crew stormed the cockpit. The 33 passengers and 7 crew members on board perished. The crash site is at approximately 20 minutes flying time from Washington. 19th event, smoke rises from the Pentagon after the E-ring section collapses. 20th event, 10:20, last one was 10:15 a.m. 10:28 a.m. North Tower collapses after burning for 102 minutes. More than 1,600 people were killed as a result of the attack on the North Tower. 21st event, 11 a.m. Near the World Trade Center, when the South Tower collapses, Mayor Rudolph Giuliani and senior members of his administration find temporary shelter inside an office building close by. As the dust begins to settle, they walk north, intent on establishing a new base of operations for city government. Reporters catch up with the mayor, who urges the public at 11:02 a.m. to evacuate Lower Manhattan. He will continue to address the public in briefings at a temporary headquarters at the New York City Police Academy throughout the day. I would like to take this opportunity to tell everyone to remain calm to the extent that they can and evacuate Lower Manhattan. That's a quote from Rudy Giuliani, who was the mayor of New York City at the time. 22nd event, 8:30 p.m. U.S. President George W. Bush addresses the nation from the White House. The search is underway for those who are behind these evil acts. I've directed the full resources of our intelligence and law enforcement communities to find those responsible and bring them to justice. We will make no distinction between the terrorists who committed these acts and anyone who harbored them. 23rd event, 10:30 p.m. Around this time, rescuers locate Port Authority police officers William Himino and Sergeant John McLaughlin, injured but alive in the debris of the World Trade Center. They free Officer Himino after 3 hours of dangerous tunneling. Sergeant McLaughlin's rescue takes another 8 hours. Workers will extricate the 18th survivor, Janelle Guzman, on the afternoon of September 12th, and she will be the last person rescued. And there's actually a movie that was made called Twin Towers, which stars Nicolas Cage, and it talks about the events surrounding this rescue, and it is extremely accurate, and it's a very good movie to watch in terms of theatrical films. Okay, that is the end of slideshow 1, and now we will get ready to move into slideshow number 2. Ready?
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. This is slideshow number 2. Hopefully we'll have time to get through this. This has 61 slides and we have about 20 to 25 minutes left, so this is going to be probably quicker than I would like it to be. Last summer I was lucky enough through a professional conference I was on with the Medal of Honor, with the Freedmen's Foundation in Valley Forge, the Medal of Honor Foundation, to actually go up and go to Ground Zero again, and I got really a VIP tour of some of the new buildings that have been reconstructed, and this is actually inside 7 World Trade Center, which is actually the 3rd building that collapsed on September 11th. Okay, so here obviously you can see this building is already burning. That is the North Tower. And this picture is when the South Tower was actually struck by United Flight 175. Okay, so here you can see pictures. This is a picture from the North Tower. A lot of these pictures were actually taken by New York City Police Department helicopters. You've got to remember, and I kind of could have added a lot of additional commentary to the first slideshow to explain some things, but we're just on such a tight timeline. That's why I say this really could be a whole class, a whole course on this. But if you were paying attention to that particular slide, it will tell you that when the North Tower was struck, the plane went right through the center of the building, and it destroyed all the elevators and all the stairways. So no one above the impact floor was saved. Everybody above the impact floor perished. So all of these people who are hanging out the windows, they have no way to get down, and they're just trying to get away from the heat and the smoke. So obviously there are not really any graphic slides in this show because it would not be appropriate for this audience. This is probably the most heart-wrenching slide, I guess you might say, is a person of a picture jumping from the North Tower. And one of the questions that I get quite often is, obviously if you're jumping from over 100 stories, you have no chance of survival, so why would you do that? You know, why would you in essence commit suicide? And really the answer to that question is because these people really didn't even have a choice. It was not even a conscious choice. Everybody, I think, held out hope till the end that they would be rescued. I don't think most people realized there was no ability to rescue them because there were no elevators, there were no stairs. But before I was a police officer, I was actually a firefighter. And what I tell people is unless you've been inside a burning building, you have no idea what that type of heat feels like. So at that point, it's almost animal instinct. If you think about the best analogy I can give, if you think about your kitchen, water boils at 212 degrees. So imagine please don't anybody do this, try this, but imagine if you had a pot of water boiling on the stove, and then you took your hand and you put your hand on that pot and weren't able to take it away. When you touch something hot, your natural reaction is to move your hand away immediately as soon as you get burned. But imagine if you couldn't. Or imagine worse, that's 212 degrees. This is burning at 2,000 degrees. So these people did not have any choice. The heat just literally drove them out of the building. Again, this is a photograph from a helicopter. And how you can tell, very hard to see, but how you can tell this is the North Tower is because if you look very carefully right here, you can see the TV antenna. That's the easiest way to distinguish between the two buildings. The North Tower has the TV antenna on top of it. And again, if you look very carefully, you can actually see the blade of the helicopter in the top of the photograph. And again, let me back up a second here. So all of this, and I guess I should back up to some of the facts from the earlier slideshow. This is all the collapse and debris of the South Tower. So the North Tower was hit first. The South Tower was hit second. So why did the South Tower collapse first? And as I'll explain that in a second, and you'll understand the engineering aspect of this as I get a closer look at the North Tower. And again, this is all debris. This is all the debris now. And you got to remember, the tallest building in Knoxville is the First Tennessee building. That's 57 stories tall. Okay, these are 110 stories tall. Most of these buildings are over 50 stories tall, and you could see how high this plume of debris is. By the way, nobody knew at the time, but everything that is killing the first responders today is inhaling all of this. All of this contains anything and everything you can imagine. When I talked about James Adroga in the prior presentation, the first New York City police officer to die post 9/11, when they did his autopsy, the majority of what they found in his lungs were powdered glass from all the windows that were vaporized. But this contains anything and everything you can imagine you would find in a 110-story office building, all kind of carcinogens, and it also includes human remains. They actually found human remains in his lungs too that were vaporized during this collapse. And asbestos. These buildings were built when asbestos was designated as a hazardous material. So these buildings were also full of asbestos. This is actually a picture that I took last summer. Not this summer, summer of 2019, from 3 World Trade Center, which has now been rebuilt. I took this from the 80th floor. And the The reason I took this particular picture was, this is the Williamsburg Bridge over here, and the police precinct I was assigned to is basically right over here at the foot of the bridge. So you can see its proximity to the World Trade Center. That's where I was assigned on September 11th. So again, you see this cloud of smoke, North Tower, TV antenna. You can even see from this distance the amount of flames. Again, a whole line of flames. The whole floor is on fire. So again, it doesn't look like a big fire. It'll look a little bit bigger as you get closer. But if you understand the size of this building, you'll understand the amount of fire involved in this. So here's a pretty good picture that shows the outline of the plane. So the plane almost hit the building dead center. And again, it started at the 89th floor. So going back to the question I asked before, why did the South Tower collapse first? Because the South Tower, the plane actually hit the edge of the building. It did not hit it straight on. So because it took out the edge of the building and it hit it at a much lower floor, it hit it around, I want to say floor 74, that means all this weight was now basically was being held up by 3 sides of the building instead of 4. And where here you only had, from 89 to 110, on the South Tower you had from 74 to 110. You had all that unstable weight, and again, once you knocked out a corner, it made the building much more unstable and allowed it to collapse sooner. Keeping in mind that nobody ever dreamed that either one of these buildings would ever collapse. Nobody ever thought this building would collapse until the first building actually collapsed. And that is when they ordered the evacuation of the second building. And again, just another picture, you can see the level of fire. And again, nobody above the impact floor, nobody escaped. There were no survivors, and obviously there would be no way that anybody could get to them to rescue them. So, one other thing that nobody really ever counted on during this whole rescue operation was the fact that normally when you fight a high-rise fire, most elevators, you might see them sometimes as like fire department key or fire department access. So what happens is the fire department has special keys to control elevators. So in a high-rise fire, what the fire department normally does is actually take control of the elevators, go 1 or 2 floors before the fire with all their equipment, stage their equipment, and then go up and fight the fire. There were no elevators in this building. Every single elevator was destroyed. So, to actually get to the fire floor, carrying 80 pounds of equipment without stopping would have taken 3 hours. So after one complete hour of going up the stairs, the firefighters had only made it up to about the 33rd or the 34th floor. That's as far as they had made it in this particular building. There was actually one chief who was killed in the South Tower, and he almost made it up before the building collapsed because he was on his own. He wasn't carrying any equipment, and he was actually a marathon runner. He actually made it up just about to the impact floor before the building collapsed. But in terms of the actual rescue operations here, that's basically as high as the fire department made it, into the 30s. Again, a little bit more of a close-up, and even closer close-up. And again, you could just see the level of fire and destruction inside this building. So, another question that comes up is, all right, so, and this was a math problem we did, why didn't you rescue people with a ladder or a ladder truck? Okay, so generally the biggest ladder truck is about 100 feet tall. And we kind of turn this, among other things, into a math lesson. Each floor of a building equals about 10 feet. So a ladder truck, in theory, could go up 10 stories. But if you think of a right triangle, because you can't have a ladder straight up, your Pythagorean theorem in math, your ladder actually has to be in an angle. So effectively, the highest building somebody can be rescued with a ladder truck is 8 stories. After 8 stories, ladders are not an option. We already talked about elevators were not an option. Internal staircases were not an option. So your only other option is, why didn't people go to the roof and get rescued from the roof by helicopter? Well, if you look at this picture right here, it is impossible to land a helicopter with that level of fire and smoke. So that would have been the last possibility people had. Again, not a viable option. So none of those people in those buildings had any chance whatsoever, none, for rescue. And here you see the beginning of the North Tower starting to collapse. And again, I don't know if this is the one or I have another picture like this, but when I look at this picture, it actually reminds me of like a mushroom cloud from a nuclear explosion. And that's kind of what it was like on the ground with the suction and the impact. And again, you see this toxic dust cloud. And again, time is running thin, so I'm kind of pushing through some of these slides quickly. One thing I will say, I noted in the earlier set of slides about the fuel load in the aircraft. So the hijackers picked transcontinental flights, picked flights going from the East Coast to California because they knew that they would have the most fuel on board. And of course their intention was to use these planes as flying bombs. What they did not count on, luckily, is transcontinental flights tend to leave very early in the morning. So by the time they hijacked these planes and crashed them into the buildings, a majority of the people in the World Trade Center were not at work yet. Each one of these buildings normally has 50,000 employees in them, and then that's not counting the people visiting and transient employees. So it would not be uncommon for those two buildings to have upwards of 200,000 people in them. So when this initially happened, obviously 3,000 lives one life is a grievous loss of life. But when this happened, nobody thought that the numbers were actually going to be that low. Once these buildings collapsed, everybody thought that the casualties were going to be in the tens of thousands. But because it was so early in the morning and the other building collapsed so quickly, it saved the lives of tens of thousands of people. Here you can see another police helicopter right there. Again, this huge toxic cloud of smoke that just covered everything. And what's very interesting, I'll save this for another slide. And you can see it racing down the streets anywhere there's an opening. And there were actually, if you probably can't see it, but there's actually a baseball field over here. And they actually did wind up landing some helicopters over there later on to try and evacuate some people. Here's Ellis Island. Here's the Statue of Liberty. This is the Hudson River. Oh, actually, I took this picture myself. I took this picture from, again, 3 World Trade Center when I was up on the 80th floor last summer. So this is a picture I took. So people in those buildings on that day would have had a similar view of the Statue of Liberty. And here you can see the flagpole that was in the first slide of the initial set of pictures. So that picture would have been taken from over here, flagpole, and then the World Trade Center in the background. So this is a picture again I took last summer from 3 World Trade Center and looking down. And here you can see where the memorial pools, where the actual Twin Towers used to exist. This is the actual edge of the 9/11 museum itself. This is actually the Freedom Tower right here. 7 World Trade Center is over here. And this construction project over here is actually 2 World Trade Center. So as of last summer, this was the only building of the 7 that had not been reconstructed yet. And also pay attention to this glass ceiling over here. So this is actually an office, but there's actually a mall in here and a food court and restaurants. So there's actually a food court with tables that sits underneath this glass. Again, there's a little bit of a close-up picture. I zoomed in. Memorial, and this is the whole plaza. These are all white swamp oaks. There was one planted for every first responder that died on 9/11. And then there is one tree over here called a survivor tree that has a story all of its own. I worked on a documentary film called The Trees, which is great to watch. I believe it's available on Amazon Prime if you subscribe to that. You'll see my name in the credits. Great story about the design of the plaza and the survivor tree. But again, that could be a whole other presentation in and of itself. This was a picture I took from 7 World Trade Center, from about the 3rd floor, again, looking into, and these fountains, by the way, are the largest man-made waterfalls in North America. But again, if we do a part 3, if we decide to do that, that will really get into the specifics and the symbolism and the design of the memorial itself post 9/11, which was really, really well done. September 11th, 19 years ago, you'll start to see boats. You'll see more in some other pictures. This was actually the largest water rescue in United States history. And I'm just going to shoot through the rest of the slides now really quick, because unfortunately we're out of time. And if there's anything really important, I'll mention it real quick, and then that's really all I've got. Here's what I was talking about. All boats, every boat in the area was called upon to go to Lower Manhattan to try and evacuate people. So here's one last thing I'd like to say before we run out of time. All of these vehicles here are police and fire vehicles that were not initially destroyed on 9/11, but they're covered in dust. What's interesting is that on the second day, on September 12, 2011, all of these vehicles were condemned by the EPA and were actually towed intact to the landfill because they were said they were too toxic to get into them and couldn't be cleaned. And meanwhile, first responders were working on this pile for days and days and days and days without any protective breathing equipment, which is why we're in the shape we're in now. Here you have a good picture, like all these vehicles, ladder trucks, fire trucks, ambulances. So remember the picture I showed you earlier of this glass, of the glass ceiling over the food court? Well, if you look right here, this hole was caused by a jet engine that fell off one of the jets and went right through the ceiling of the building. And this is a picture last summer from inside, now all repaired again. And just one other thing, you could, the level of destruction, you could see this building here, the whole side of the building's torn off. And this was actually taken, this picture was actually taken by a U.S. aircraft reconnaissance plane on September 12th, and over ground zero, you could see it. This looks like a giant bomb crater. So this was a quote that I kind of like. It says, "My scars tell a story. They are a reminder of times when life tried to break me but failed. They are markings of where the structure of my character was welded." And this is a quote from Tom Brokaw on 9/11. "This day changes our world forever," and it did. We'll have to end it there. I'm sorry this was so quick at the end, but there's just so much information to go through in a lot of time. Thank you so much for watching and joining us again.